Hello, and welcome to Myths Like Gas and Waters Empowering Sustainable Neighborhoods virtual neighborhood series. My name is Gail Jones Carson, and I'm the Vice President of Community and External Affairs. I want to take a moment to thank each of you for joining us today, and hopefully, you will learn a great deal about solar energy and where we are with it today and where we're headed. I want to also thank all of our staff who have worked to make today's show the show that is going to be, which is going to be great. And I'm hoping that you will benefit greatly from it. The webinar today will focus on programs that are available and how to make the decisions for installing solar. Beverly Perkins, MLGW's head of corporate social responsibility, will provide more detail on today's show and introduce our guests. Again, I want to thank you for being here with us today. Beverly, I'm rolling it over to you. Thank you very much, Beverly.
All right, thank you very much, Gail. Gail has pretty much covered what we're going to talk about. I'm going to be really, really brief because our presenters today have a lot of information to share. Today, we want to thank Becky Williamson, who is the MLGW Strategic Marketing Coordinator, and really Becky, who really helped us pull this panel of speakers together. And she's sort of our in-house guru on all things social, all things solar. Also, we want to thank Lisa Hayslip, who's here with us. She is the Senior Program Manager at the Tennessee Valley Authority. And Lisa will be talking about sort of some things to come. So you're going to get a sneak preview, so to speak, of what's getting ready to come up as it relates to solar energy in the area. And then we're going to also have on today with us Chris Kasoja. Chris is he is the president of the Tennessee Solar Energy Industry Association, and he's going to let you know about solar installation costs, other considerations, and what we always are looking for are some tips. And we're not just going to talk to the experts and the professionals today. We've also rounded up a couple of MLGW customers who've already gone through all of this, and they're going to share you the real deal of sort of the inside scoop, things that you want to know if you're really considering doing this. So we want to thank those customers, Mike and Linda, who are going to share some information with us as well. Then we're going to throw it back to Becky. Becky's going to wrap up. We're going to have Q&As, but they're probably going to answer all of your questions before you even think of them. So please make sure, enter your questions into the Q&A, and then we'll come back at the end and we'll be answering those questions. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Becky so we can get started.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. Like we said, today we're going to focus on the information that residential customers like you need to know when you're thinking about making a decision for solar. So, guys, let's pull up the slides. All righty, next slide. We're going to start with some national trends, just so you can see our industry has been evolving across the country, which has actually ended up benefiting all sorts of customers. So, future of solar in the United States is very bright. Solar is called photovoltaics, or PV in industry terms. So we call it solar because it's much easier to say than photovoltaics. But it's basically capturing the energy from the sun and using it to generate electricity. There's a lot of magic that happens, but that's the gist of it. If you look at this graph right here, it shows about 8 or 9 years of trends in terms of solar generation capacity that's been installed across the United States. And it shows several more years of estimated projections. You're going to see that residential solar, that's the dark blue section at the bottom, growing increasingly. Non-residential or business commercial solar kind of growing as well, not as much. And a lot of growth in utility scale solar. So that's the big gray sections of the bars. And there are lots of reasons why that happens. Utility scale projects may be smaller in number, but they're much greater in generation capacity. And for those of you that have followed along about solar development in the news, back in 2019, a 68.5 megawatt solar array was installed on some property out in Millington near the Navy base. Takes about 400 acres of land. That one project represents 87% of all solar generation in Shelby County today. The other 13% is encompassed from 249 other solar projects. So you can see how when you get big projects, you may have one, but it's enormous. When you're on the residential sector, you're talking about lots of much smaller projects. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, there you go. So this one is focusing on the cost And the good news is the cost of solar generation has dropped about 70% in the last decade, which is enormous. Some of the very first projects installed in Shelby County cost more than $10 per watt installed. So it was really expensive back in the mid 20s. The yellow line in this graph on the left shows you that declining cost. So it was more than $8 per watt installed in, 2010. So it's come down quite a bit. A national average blended cost, it's now below $2 a watt installed. The bars on this graph show generation capacity installed over those years as well. So as the price went down, the number of projects, the amount of solar across the US has gone up. You see that little blip there for 2016? That represents a year when federal tax credits were originally slated to end before they were extended, a blip because there were a lot of projects trying to get done in that point. If you look at the graph on the right, it's showing modeled average solar installation costs. So the first two bars are representing residential, then the next two are non-residential, those business customers. The last four are for utility scale installations, whether they are fixed tilt or rotating axis. So you can see that utility scale installations are 20% of the cost of a residential installation. So when you're looking at solar, the most economic way to get it is by utilities putting large scale projects into the mix. And that is happening more and more as the cost of solar continues to come down, and utilities like TVA, our power supplier, look to further reduce the carbon emissions from their fleets. All right, next slide. So here's another national look. When you're looking at solar and you're talking to your friends and relatives across the country, your return on investment for your money is going to be based on several factors that really all vary by location. If you look at this graph up here in the upper right-hand side, that shows annual average solar irradiance, which is a fancy word for sunshine. And the places that have the most sunshine, those are the ones that are going to be able to generate the most electricity from their solar panels, right? So if you look at the other maps, kind of going counterclockwise from there, the next map is April, then you see August, and then you see December. You can see how generation output, how that amount of sunshine changes throughout the year. Unfortunately for this area, we're kind of in that middle to lower end of the spectrum. And you can see out west, especially California, is kind of a really good sweet spot for solar because they do get a lot of sunshine. What that means is if you put in the same size system here and somewhere else in the country, you're going to get different amounts of generation output. Locally, you can expect to see somewhere between 1,100 kilowatt hours of electricity for every 1 kilowatt of generation capacity that you install over the course of a year. And we're going to talk details more in a minute. That's going to affect how quickly you get a return on investment is electricity rates. So you're going to get a return on investment more quickly if you live in an area that has really high electricity rates. Hawaii, almost 33 cents a kilowatt hour, enormous electricity costs. But then again, you're living in Hawaii. California, almost 23 cents a kilowatt hour. The national average is 13 cents. Shelby County, MLGW, is 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're not going to get your payback as quick being here in Shelby County because we don't have the high electricity rates exist in other parts of the country. And I did check, and the only state that has average utility rates less than what we have here based on this March 2021 data is Oklahoma. So that gives you some variety. And the other thing that matters is if you're in an area that has a tight power supply, you probably are getting incentives from your state or your utility because they want to get you off the grid when there's the most demand. So California, again, a great example. And if you think about, you hear about, calls for conservation, you hear about brownouts and really just supply issues with generation. That's not the case here in the Tennessee Valley. TVA has plenty of generation, so there aren't those types of incentives available to assist with your return on investment. Okay, next slide. So the information we're going to focus on today is going to help you figure out if solar generation is right for your home. Okay. Next slide. And by the way, these are just examples of some customers in Shelby County that have solar. Some of them are in rural areas, so they have sort of a chain link fence around it if they put it in the yard. Some are in subdivisions, so they had, a nice wooden fence around theirs. Most people end up putting it on the roof. All right, so the things we're going to focus on today are sort of the 5 aspects of the solar process with MLGW. Research is the first one. You need to do a lot of research. Think about solar. It's a long-term investment. If you're putting in solar, you're probably spending 10, 40, $50,000, maybe more, to put in solar, especially if you put in a battery. That's more than the price of a new car. So you need to spend a lot of time doing research, and we're going to help you with that today with a lot of tips and things to consider. From there, we're going to talk about the application process, the construction and interconnection process, the testing process, which is the last required step before your system can come online, and then just ongoing operation and maintenance. All righty, next slide. So for research, the first thing to think about is, why are you interested in solar? If your interest is to buy less electricity from MLGW, then Nathan, do the magic of my slide. There you are. Then your motivation is economic, okay? And if your motivation is economic, you want to save money, the first thing you should look at is making energy efficiency improvements at your house so your home needs less electricity, because the greenest kilowatt hour of electricity is the one that's not used. So focus on things like, do you need chilling equipment, water heating equipment? Do you need more insulation? Do you need new windows, weather stripping? All those things that will make your house use less electricity overall. That's the first place to start if you're Mick. And the bonus for that is then you can actually install a smaller solar array, so that it saves you money 2 different ways. Keep in mind that your MLGW savings are not going to be the same every month. Your savings are going to vary based on weather. We just saw those maps that showed how solar, you have sunshine changes throughout the year. So it's going to vary based on weather. It's going to vary based on how much solar energy your home can consume in real time, whether that's equipment operating in your house, or if you include battery storage, the electricity used to recharge that battery. It's going to depend on whether or not you're selling excess generation and what MLGW's electric rate is for that period. Our rates fluctuate every month with the TVA factor as well as seasonal factors. So if your motivation is economic, there's a lot to consider. If your motivation is to reduce your carbon footprint, Nathan, it's an environmental motivator. So maybe you're looking at, and Nathan, go ahead and click once or twice more. There should be two graphs that'll pop up on the right. Your motivation is environmental. It's important to say, do you know that today, 59% of the electricity that you buy from MLGW is generated from carbon-free resources? That is based on TVA's 2020 generation mix, the carbon-free generation for years. So their steps to change their generation fuel sources automatically are helping reduce your carbon footprint. Over the 2 graphs, we see the top one is 2005, which is the baseline year. The one below it is their fiscal year 2020. And you can see how much it's changed. There used to be a lot of coal, not much nuclear, very little natural gas. Now there's more nuclear, which is a carbon-free source, and it's one of the ways that utilities get closer to zero carbon. There's more natural gas, there's less coal. So as TVA changes their generation mix, as they retire coal plants and put new generation on, they're automatically reducing carbon footprint. You can install solar generation to reduce your household's footprint further. So if you decide that solar at your home is not the way to go, there's programs that we'll talk about at the end where you use renewables. If your motivation for putting in solar is to have power during outages, hit it, Nathan. We're talking about resiliency. That means you need to include battery storage. So solar power is going to generate it. You're going to use it on site for appliances that are operating. You're also going to use it to charge your battery. Use that battery after hours. You can use that battery during power outages to then have some solar energy at that point. And if your motivation is to keep up with the Joneses, hit it, Nathan, then really what you're talking about is the cool factor. And the cool factor just stopped. All right, there's the cool factor. If you want to keep up with your brother-in-law who brags about a lot of stuff, you want to keep up with the neighbor who, has the coolest stuff, and you want to be just like him, or maybe you are that cool neighbor and people want to be like you. It's important to understand the motivations that that customer had, because they may not be the same as yours. So keep that in mind when you're looking at solar. If your motivation is resiliency, you're probably not as concerned about the cost. If your motivation is environmental, you may or may not be as concerned about the cost. If your motivation is strictly economic, you're probably going to find that solar is not going to be the best way for you to spend your money and see that return. So things to think about. All right, next slide. All right, so questions to consider. Do you own your house? If so, you own your roof and the rights to put anything on it. But if you rent your house, if you live in an apartment, if you live in a condo and you don't actually have a roof, solar generation on site is not going to be a solution for you. So you got to think about that first and foremost. Secondly, does your property have trees? Those, they're going to shade your roof. If so, those trees are going to need to be removed or trimmed back annually in order for you to install solar and actually benefit from it. In the video we're going to see later, one of the customers who we filmed in the kind of mid-afternoon has a really enormous tree, and you can see that that enormous tree is shading a lot of her solar panels. That customer was recommended to take out the tree, and if not take out the tree, to trim those tree branches back annually. So otherwise, she's not getting as much generation as she could out of her system. Conversely, if you have a tree that provides a lot of shade to your home, especially in the summertime, maybe you want to think about solar is not the great option because that tree is a great energy efficiency benefit to you. And if you have to take it out, you're going to see some higher utility bills, especially in terms of air conditioning. Next thing to consider is what's the condition of your roof? You're talking about an investment that's going to be up there for 20, 25 years, maybe longer. So if your roof needs to be replaced, if your roof, you're going to need to replace it in the next several years, think about doing that before you do solar so you don't have to then take the panels off to replace the roof. Consider is, do you have sufficient space on the south or the west sides of your roof or in your yard if you're thinking about a ground mounted system? Solar takes up space. You've got to have enough space pointing in those directions to really get good generation. Do you intend to pay for the installation in cash, or if the installer offers financing, are you going to finance it? If you're financing, interest charges in your project costs when you start looking at payback. Do you have sufficient liability coverage to liability insurance to cover potential damages during the life of the system? Damages that might happen to your home, that might happen to MLGW employees or MLGW equipment, or other customers and customer property connected to the system if your solar array happened to malfunction and cause damages. The next is, do you expect to move in the next 20, 25 years? Most people move pretty quickly. There's pretty turnover. I want to say MLGW customer turnover on average is something like 7 years. If you're one of the people who moves often, solar might not be for you because you're not going to get that return on investment while you're living there. Next thing to consider, if you live in a neighborhood that has a homeowners association, find out what those regulations are because some of them do not allow solar. Some of them allow it, but it can't be visible from the street. So find out what that is while you're doing your research rather than after you've signed a contract and then you have to cancel it. And lastly, and this is a really unfortunate one to have to put out there, but is your home in an area where there may be tampering? We've had customers who've had people come up and activate, turn off their system because they were playing around with the AC disconnect switch. Customer didn't know it. We didn't know it until we, discovered through a report that there was no generation. So, do you have vandalism? We've had customers who unfortunately have had wiring pulled out because thieves wanted to sell it for the copper. Do you live in an area that's subject to those crazy gunshots into the sky and the bullets come down somewhere? We have a business customer who no longer operates his system because he was having to replace solar panels so often due to bullet damage. He just said, I'm done. So those are things you have to think about that probably aren't top of mind, but they're important things to consider. All right, next slide. The next part of your research is going to be, what interconnection option do you want to pursue? There are 3 of them here currently. The first one is called self-generation. We also call it behind the meter. You'll hear that a lot in the industry. This is where you're consuming that solar power on site in real time, right? Instantaneously. As it's generated, you're using it. If not, you have excess generation and it's going to flow to the grid without any benefit to you, right? There is a monthly electric service availability charge that applies to customers who self-generate. That is a way for MLGW to recover some of the fixed operating costs that we have embedded into our cost per kilowatt hour of electricity. If you're generating your own electricity, we can't recover that cost to serve you, so there's this extra charge that applies. The next option is dispersed power production. It's a TVA program where you can sell 100% of your solar power to TVA at their avoided cost. Varies monthly, averages about 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour over the year. MLGW reports that generation to TVA on a calendar month basis, and then TVA pays the customer directly. 2.5 cents is not an incentive. This is a regulatory compliance program. It's not something that it would be really foolish. You would have impossible economics if that were the approach you were taking. But you can combine those two options and do self-generation with dispersed power production. So it's the best of both. You're using your electricity on site in real time. If you have any excess, including excess after you've stored a battery, if you include a battery, then you're selling it to TVA rather than just giving it away. So that's the option that we're seeing most customers pursue right now. And just in solar, and you came to the meeting today, there are 2 TVA programs that have closed to new applicants, but customers are still out there. Those systems still exist, where they're selling 100% of the power to TVA in exchange for credits on their utility bill. So if those homeowners move away, they can turn around and transfer those agreements to the new customer who moves in. You just need to contact MLGW to work on that paperwork. All right, so that's kind of step 1 of the research. And now Chris from Tennessee is going to come and talk about some of the technical aspects of what you need to know, what the equipment is, how it works, things to consider. Chris, your turn.
Very good. Thank you, Becky. Really appreciate it, and a good overview. So I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive into what Becky was talking about now, and just want to get some of the terminology clear. So as we're talking, you know what pieces fit where, and as you're evaluating a solar proposal, you know what the kinds of things to look for. So actually, can you go back up a slide really quickly? There we go. So I mean, just real simple, basic. You know, we've got sunlight coming in. It's a solar panel. Solar panel creates DC energy, like batteries. Batteries create DC energy. So in order to be used for the house, we have to invert or convert that energy into AC energy, and we do that through an inverter. So that's key component. Now those are components that you'll see outside the house. But then you'll also see now battery storage. Again, since Becky went through the programs, most of what we're seeing now is a combination of a smaller behind the meter system or a system that incorporates battery storage, so you can store some of the energy generated by the solar and use it later in the evening. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then obviously you have the utility there. So either you're taking energy from the utility or you're sending it back if you're over generating and not using it real time. So these are kind of the concepts. And then you can see a couple of the diagrams from the systems there of some of the monitoring and how things will work. And this is one of the things that, again, as you're evaluating different technologies and proposals, is to start to understand the components and start to understand how you, the homeowner, are going to be able to actually evaluate your system over time, not just initially, but see how it's working over time, so you know what it's doing and making sure it's delivering what you expect it to. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So to take this behind the meter concept. So if you look at this graph, this is what an average home uses in the day. And this was actually a warmer day of the year. And this is the energy usage. So you see the peaks and valleys. As the air conditioning came on, it went off, air conditioning came on and off. And that's what they used in a day. But obviously it wasn't just a flat usage. Things are fluctuating all the time. And again, since we're trying to match the solar generation with the usage in the home, if you click one more time, you'll see what the solar generation looks like. So you see, well, that's the middle of the day. We're generating solar power, obviously, when the sun's out. But there's a lot of gaps in between when I've got extra solar and it's higher than demand. And then obviously in the morning, evenings, it's the other way around. So if you don't use energy storage, all of that solar generation that coincides with your usage would be used to offset your electricity. But if you're generating more solar than you're using, that would go out to the grid. And that's the energy that either you need to put in a battery, or as Becky highlighted, go through the DPP program and you can be reimbursed that rate for it. So that's what you need to start thinking about. And also understanding that there's no balanced equation on how to get the perfect amount of storage and the perfect amount of solar in here. So it's always going to be some give and takes as you start to understand this, but something you'll want to dig into with the proposal and understand how much usage I have, how much solar is being proposed, and then maybe if I have storage, how much storage I need. So click one more time. So if I add storage to this now, you can see the state of charge or the batteries, how much is in the batteries on the bottom blue line. You can see it starts to charge up during all those gaps. And then in the evening, as the solar goes down, you discharge from the batteries. So that's a way that you can use more of that energy real time in your home as it's being generated, and then into the evening and limit how much is exported. And then as Becky said, not only do you get the usage of that energy, but then you get the resiliency as well, that if we have the storms that have been increasing in intensity and you have an outage, you have that resiliency as well that goes with it. So what it looks like, click one more time. On your bill, it's not going to be a credit or now something on the bill that says, hey, I generated this much. All it's going to look like is you used a lot more or a lot less electricity than you did last year. So you can see this customer last year used almost 2,300 kilowatt hours. This year only used 619. Again, that's that delta, because if you look at the chart, they were able to offset that. So if you want to click one more time, I think there's a couple words that go with it. So again, you're using it real time and or storing it. You can discharge the battery after hours and then have that resiliency. So let's dig in just a little bit more, go to the next slide. And talk about some of the terms. And this is what gets confused a lot. And I'm not going to read through all this, but you can kind of look at it. But I'm going to give you an analogy. And I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, so it's always easy for me to go to fluids and liquids versus electricity. So if you think about the MLGW has a water pipe coming to your house, and actually they do, they have the some of the water as well, but that's what your electricity is. And there's a capacity, there's the size of that pipe that comes in, and the size of the wires that come into your home. So that is your kW capacity. So when you're talking about solar or real-time usage or output of batteries, you're talking about kW. So that's how big the pipe is. But kilowatt hours is actually an energy measurement. So that is how much fluid or how much water is flowing through the pipe. So I have the size of the pipe, and then I have how much water is going through the pipe. And those are the two concepts to balance out as you're looking at the systems. So you'll see on the energy storage side, you'll have a kilowatt hour rating, and you also have a kilowatt rating. And on the solar side, you're going to have a kilowatt rating. So as you're comparing proposals, those are the key numbers you're going to be looking at to understand, okay, this proposal is this one's that, and this is how I compare them, or this one has more or less. But you also want to compare how many kilowatt hours you use in a year or in a month. So you see, okay, how much is this system going to offset? As you see, as Becky says, research is important because it gets really complicated as you take all these different pieces and put it together. But these are the basic concepts that you're looking at as you're trying to evaluate not only a proposal for solar and storage or a solar system, but what you're using and how to apply that. So next slide. So cost, and unfortunately, I'm going to highlight the bullet point in the middle here that says, like everything, it depends. And especially now that we have this whole storage component, it really just depends on what your goals are. If you want just, like Becky said, I thought she laid it out really, really well. You want something that is a little bit of solar, to have the environmental aspect. You can do a smaller solar only system without storage and just put that behind the meter where you're trying to keep the solar curve underneath what you're using. And maybe you manage your usage, move your clothes dryer and washing machine to only run during the middle of the day, or things like that you can fit within that solar window. And when you're doing solar only, you're going to be $2 to $4 a watt installed. So somewhere in there. And again, it just depends on what type of systems, what your roof looks like, how many different roof sections you have, things like that. When you add storage, though, it gets really complicated because now we're trying to match, again, that equation that we were just talking about of how much solar versus how much storage. But it can be, just big ballpark number, somewhere around, $800 to $1,000 per kilowatt hour of storage there. And again, the systems vary widely. There are a number of different technologies, and the technologies are changing quickly and getting more affordable. Not literally, just in the last year, things have gotten cheaper, and you're starting to see the curves that Becky showed for solar are starting to hit storage now. So the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot of changes in the storage market because solar and storage is kind of the next thing, and microgrids are the next thing. That's where things are going with this space, and we're starting to see obviously a lot more of it today. So, but when you're looking at a turnkey installation, you're looking at the solar on the roof, the inverter, you've got the storage if you're doing storage on it, you've got all the utility disconnects, and it's really important because there's a lot of things, and Lisa will talk about some of it here, that are important for MLG&W to make sure that they're line workers are safe when they're coming out and working, and also to make sure your system on a whole is installed safely. And, you know, obviously you have the permitting and everything that goes with it there too, and then sales tax. So all these things are things you're going to want to look for in the proposal and make sure you kind of check them off. Yep, I got this. And again, things that you can compare between different things. But then everything is eligible for the 26% tax credit, provided the batteries are 100% charged by solar, which most of what we're looking at here would be. All right, next slide. So things to look at when you're looking at installers. So I keep talking about all these proposals, we're getting proposals. Well, please, I really urge people to get multiple proposals. There's a lot of ability for people to say, hey, you know, this is a great price, why don't you take it today? But like Becky said, it's a big investment. We're looking at, you know, systems literally can be anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000. Again, it just depends on what you want and what you're trying to achieve. So get multiple proposals, and again, use those key elements there to compare proposals and look what's there. But do research in the companies too. Make sure that they're licensed. Make sure they've got the proper accreditations that go with it. Expertise, maybe they've got some references that you can talk with, or you can see things, maybe not just the reviews, but maybe you want to talk to another customer or go through their experience, or even just take the proposal and say, hey, this is something that you've installed somewhere else. I want to talk to that customer to see if it's even the right size for me. Or maybe there's other considerations that I'll have as I'm trying to go through that. But again, experience matters in all this because it's an evolving industry, products evolving, and you know, asking questions is always important, and just taking the time to really understand. And if you don't understand, there's resources like MLG&W. Tennessia is a resource to reach out to and just give some pragmatic, candid feedback on, well, these are, again, the things you need to look for. Or I've not heard of that before. We can dig into it. But it's all, you know, just part of the process as we look at these type projects. So again, our website is there at the bottom. You can see, you know, who we are. We are the industry association of all the installers. So invite you to look there. We've got information there as well to look at. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, Nathan, let's go to the next slide. Thank you, Chris. So this is a list of red flags, and every one of these is a real customer situation where a customer has called me after signing a contract with a solar installer. And we're going through these because this is what you might encounter as you're talking to installers. And some installers are certainly better than others. And Chris, you'll be happy to know none of these questionable installers were Tennessia members. So that's the good news. So the first thing, you will have installers tell you, and it's not just in Shelby County, it's all across the region, don't tell the utility. They're just going to try to talk you out of this. Let me assure you, MLGW wants to talk to you if you are interested in solar. We want to make sure that you fully understand the options, that you understand the interconnection process, and to help you set some realistic expectations. Because when I talk to customers after they've signed a contract, after they've installed a system, and then they call because they're all upset because it's not working out like they thought it was supposed to work out, they're pointing their dissatisfaction at MLGW without ever having talked to us for us to help them. So we want you to call us. We want you to reach out. I am the person. You will see my email address at the end. Don't ever listen to someone who says, don't talk to the utility. They're trying to make some money, potentially without giving you the full facts. The second one is a solar installer who's going to tell you that they're going to handle all the paperwork. The only piece of paperwork you need to sign is the contract, and they take care of everything with the utility. Well, that's a pretty dangerous game. So as a customer, you should be reviewing and signing the MLGW application for interconnection, and you must sign the interconnection agreement that we require. And if you're going to sell excess to TVA, you must sign that. Your installer cannot do that on your behalf because they are not the customer of MLGW who's making this commitment. You know, be wary of an installer who tells you it's a limited time offer and you got to sign right now. Those high pressure sales tactics usually don't work out in your favor. All right. Beware of an installer who tells you that their price includes an MLGW rebate and/or a TVA rebate. There aren't any such rebates, but I had a customer who called me after signing a contract who wanted to make sure that the $10,000 from MLGW and the $9,000 from TVA got paid directly to the installer. not to him, so he wouldn't have to turn around and reimburse the installer. And we've had many long email exchanges and phone conversations to say, what are you talking about? So this particular gentleman was able to cancel his contract, but he lost his deposit. The last time I talked to him, he still hadn't gotten that money back because he was talking with an installer who was not, there are no rebates from MLGW or TVA at this time, right? Be wary of an installer who's going to point to an invoice and point to the gross number up top and tell you that that's the number you should use when you apply for your tax credit, even though your final cost down here is going to be substantially lower. That installer is trying to get you to commit tax fraud. The IRS says your tax credit is based on your net installed system cost after all discounts. And I know the IRS says it because this was some of the research I did for this gentleman to dig down and make sure that I was accurate, that no, indeed, it is net cost. It is not the artificially inflated cost designed to make it seem like a better deal. Beware of an installer who tells you that you don't need to get multiple quotes because they offer the best deal in town. Just don't. Always get multiple quotes. Again, you're talking about spending tens of thousands of dollars. Please research yourself. Please avail yourself to all of the information you can before you make that commitment. Read those details to make sure you're comparing apples to apples and make sure everything is documented, because that contract is going to be what you're living by for the next 20 to 25 years. Be wary of an installer who tells you that you're going to make your money back in just a few years from utility savings. Payback periods are not that short. You remember the maps we talked about. You remember the electricity rates we talked about. If you add battery storage, your payback periods are even, your system is more expensive, so it takes longer for payback. You're typically looking at 20, 25 years for payback just on solar. If you add battery to it, it could be in the 30+ year category. Now, if you add battery to it, you also have resiliency, so you have power at night and when the power's out, and there's an economic benefit that comes to that. But if you're just looking at simple payback calculations like we show here, you're not going to see those numbers the way some installers are going to tell you that they will. And lastly, beware of an installer who tells you that you're going to eliminate your electric bill. I've had such conversations with customers, and then they go, well, maybe it wasn't the whole MLGW bill. Maybe it was just, I would never have to pay electricity costs again. Well, again, that doesn't really work that way. At some point, odds are your system is going to need electricity from MLGW, whether it's a cloudy day and your system can't generate enough, or whether something happens and your system, needs repairs, whatever. So you need to be aware that even if your system is able to generate 100% of the electricity that you need, you're still going to pay the flat monthly customer charge and the electric service availability charge. Combined, those are currently $25.52. And then any other fees you have on your MLGW bill for other MLGW services, all the municipal services. So be aware, because sometimes, unfortunately, there are companies out there who are less scrupulous than others. And you want to find the companies that are honest and factual. Those are the people you want to be signing contracts with. So I offer this advice because I've talked to customers who were told this, who got themselves, signed a contract with installers who just were not the kind of people you would want your parents to sign a contract with. So just keep that in mind. Next slide. That's the end of our research, by the way. So we put a lot of emphasis on research because it really is where you need to spend most of your time when you're thinking about solar. And I hope, if nothing else, you keep that in mind. Once you've done all your research and you've decided that solar is right for you, it starts with an MLGW application for interconnection. And it's something that's typically completed by the installer, typically submitted by the installer, but you should absolutely review it for accuracy and then sign it. It's perfectly okay if it's an electronic signature, but make sure you go through and read what it says. Typical errors we see: the name on the application is not the name of the person shown on the MLGW bill. It has to be the MLGW customer record, the person whose name is on the utility bill. Sometimes the account number's wrong. We need to make sure we have an email address for that person named on the MLGW bill. And you need to make sure the interconnection option that was chosen, whether it's self-generation, dispersed power production, or self-generation with dispersed power production, you need to make sure that that is checked accurately, because I've seen submit packages, and if I hadn't caught that and said, wait, that doesn't seem right, customers would have been real unhappy when their system was installed and it didn't do what they wanted it to do. So make sure you go over that at a bare minimum. Once that's submitted, it generally takes perhaps up to 10 to 15 business days for us to do the technical review and inform you and your installer that your application has been accepted. During that technical review, if we find there are issues, if the electrical diagram is missing something, if something's in the wrong place, whatever, we're going to be working with the installer directly to get that updated, because that's something that you as the customer don't have the technical capability to do. So once we have approved that application, then we're going to prepare and send to you the required interconnection and parallel operation agreement. This is something the MLGW customer of record must sign. The solar installer cannot sign it on your behalf. That agreement you will sign in return. You're going to send it along with your insurance documentation. That agreement covers, which means you are interconnecting a generation system to MLGW, and you are liable if there's any damage or injury or death that should happen to occur if your system were to malfunction. I will tell you, I've never been aware of a malfunctioning system in Shelby County that caused any type of damage like that, but that is there, and it is a necessary component. As a result, you have to have insurance. Most homeowners insurance policies typically have a $300,000 liability coverage level. That's not sufficient. So typically find an umbrella liability policy that covers everything in terms of potential damage. I encourage you, before you sign a solar contract, to talk to your insurance company, know what your liability coverage is, know what your risk is if something were to happen. And you can find samples of these documents online at mlgw.com/greenpower, then click on Access MLGW Forms, and it will open up those forms. Alrighty, so let's go one more slide. The next step, you've made a decision, you've made your application's been approved. It's now going to move to MLGW's Builder Services Department. They're going to create a work request number. You are now officially a utility service request, just like new construction, just like I want to add, a gas line for my swimming pool. You're in there mixed with a bunch of other projects. There's typically about a 500 work request backlog within this system. So you may not get this next bullet really quick. They're going to assign a customer engineering rep, but it may take them several weeks to actually design the interconnection and issue that construction quote. So there's this delay you're going to find. That construction quote is going to be mailed to the customer, comes in a standard letter size envelope. That quote has to be paid before any MLGW work commences. So you need to make sure that you don't throw that away, because we found a lot of customers were tossing those away, and months and months and months were passing just because that quote had never been paid. If your installer is paying that cost for you, if you've written that into the contract, make sure you write that into the contract. If you've done it, forward that document to the installer so they can make that payment. So your solar panels and the inverters and the electric meter socket, which is required for the separate generation meter, they're likely going to do all of that work very quickly. And then you're going to have to wait on remaining activities, which includes inspection by code enforcement. They do that to make sure that the electrical work meets code. Then they notify MLGW through an automated system process that the project has passed its inspection. And then we have to get that notification before the customer can actually, before we can do any further work. So it's, again, it's part of construction processes in the utility world. We will install a separate generation meter. So it's a separate electrical meter at your home, and that provides measurement, power quality, revenue protection, and other functions. If you are selling your excess generation to TVA, we're reading that meter, and on a calendar month basis, we're reporting your generation to TVA so that they can make your payments. Alrighty, let's go to the next slide. After you've constructed, then you have acceptance testing. So this is the last required step in the MLGW process. Every system must pass an acceptance test before it can begin generating. It's scheduled after you or your installer contact us to be present. Sometimes it's the installer who's there, but you as the customer really should be present to kind of understand it. We mimic a power outage, make sure the system shuts down like it should. After that, you get a system acceptance form. You're good to go. All right, next slide. All right, operations and maintenance. These slides are going to be posted out there, but your generation output is going to vary seasonally based on clouds, sun, all that kind of stuff. But it's going to generate pretty much every day. Even during this winter when it was terribly cold in February and there's all that snow and ice, systems were still generating. Your panels typically have a 20-year product warranty for defects and a 20 to 25-year performance warranty. Understand the difference. Your inverters typically have a 10 to 25-year warranty. Those ones that have shorter warranties may need to be replaced during the life of the system. So other things there, but typically there's no regular maintenance unless you have to do tree trimming. Alrighty. Future home sales. Some people have solar, some people don't. If you sell your house, make sure that customer gets in touch with us. The new homeowner gets in touch with us to get paperwork signed so they can continue to benefit. All right, next slide. So we're running far behind, so I'm trying to run through quick. Federal tax incentive. We'll save this out there. Systems installed in calendar years 2021 and 2022 get a 26% federal tax credit. It drops to 22% for systems installed in calendar year 23. Then it goes away based on current legislation. Legislation has been extended several times for this tax credit. So watch what happens with the Biden administration to see if it changes in the future. Next slide. Alrighty, and actually we're going to pull up now. This is where we're pulling up Lisa's presentation. So Lisa Hayslip is with TVA. She's a senior program manager, and she worked with MLGW and other local power companies across the region to help create a new program called Green Connect. That program is not available in Shelby County yet. It will be available later this year once we get all of our contracts signed, all of our program agreements and things. So Lisa's going to run through and talk about that. And here come her slides. All right, Lisa, you're on.
All right, thank you, Becky. Like Becky mentioned, Green Connect will be coming soon in the MLGW service area. Next slide, please. I will try to go quickly and get us caught up a little bit. Green Connect is the new private scale offering that was developed in partnership with local power companies such as MLGW and Tennesseia. Both Becky and Chris that you see here today were an integral part of the team in developing that program. And I do attribute a lot of the success of the program to them and experts like them that were on the team. It was available beginning January in most areas of the Valley. MLGW will be offering it later this year. It is available to residential customers who wish to have a behind the meter system, or like Becky mentioned, a self-generate. And you can have with or without battery storage at your home. We did some research before designing this program, and what we heard from customers interested in solar was that they wanted access to objective information, access to quality installers, and assurance that the job was done right. And Green Connect does this and much more. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first benefit for residential customers was was access to objective information or educational resources. In order to access these educational resources, customers will first need to register in the TVA Green Hub. There's no cost or commitment to register. If you register for the Green Connect program, you're not committing to participation, but you will have access to these educational resources and to the QCN members. Now, when MLGW is offering this program later this year, you will be able to register. So if you go right now as an MLGW customer and try to register, you wouldn't be able to. But once they do offer this program, which we think will be soon, then you'll be able to register and have access to, there's energy efficiency information and Green Connect information, and some renewable information as well. Next slide, please. So why should you participate in Green Connect? In addition to those educational resources that we discussed, there's many other reasons to participate. Green Connect encourages you connecting with your local power company to ensure safety for you, your family, your home, and for the local power company personnel. So by establishing an interconnection agreement with MLGW, then they are aware of your behind the meter system and that it exists, and it just enhances safety for everyone. Other benefits include access to quality installers through TVA's quality contractor network and the installation verification. So let's talk just a little bit more about the Quality Contractor Network on the next slide, please. So what is the Quality Contractor Network? It's a group of quality installers that have been trained and approved to do work in the TVA Green Connect program. They agree to certain terms and agree to do business ethically and honestly in the Valley. And what's the purpose? You can see here on the slide. TVA's mission includes economic development and supporting communities supporting the communities in which we live and work. So by partnering with installers to promote quality solar installations through the Green Connect program and the QCN, we can promote both of those, economic development and community support. Next slide. So there are additional customer benefits to accessing the QCN. They are a TVA approved installer, which means that they have been fully vetted, licensed, insured, and that they received training on the Green Connect standards. Customers have access to surveys after an installer installs a system in your area. And so the customer surveys, you can show if you're satisfied with them or not, and you can see those ratings of other customers. So this is definitely enhances customer satisfaction. The quality contractors agree to perform business dealings professionally and confidentially. So the requirements to become a QCN member, really encourage, encourage quality installers in the area. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, my dog is laying here trying to jump on me, so I'm trying to get her down. My apologies. So we'll continue talking about access to the QCN. What are the installer requirements to become a QCN member? Installers must have been in business for at least 1 year, so they have to hold a valid business license. They must hold a NABCEP board certification. NABCEP, it stands for North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners. So if you have an installer that holds that certification, they are likely the cream of the crop. They're very good installers. They must have a minimum of $1 million in general liability insurance, and they must meet minimum requirements for workers' compensation insurance as defined by the states in which they do work. Next, we're going to talk about the installation verification. And you can pause here for just a minute. So as customers, you will receive an installation verification to ensure that your job was installed to TVA Green Connect program standards. It will provide you peace of mind knowing that an energy advisor verifies that that installation met program standards. But I do want to talk about what the installation verification is not. It is not a guarantee or warranty that the work was done right, and it doesn't take the place of a safety or code inspection. So you still have to have those other inspections to ensure that, but it definitely ensures that the system was installed to TVA program standards. So next we'll talk about the Green Connect Customer Hub. I think that this is also a benefit of the program. So through this hub, it has many capabilities from providing education to participants, training to installers, scheduling verifications, and then even in some areas, you can complete the interconnection application and the agreement automatically in the system. On this slide, you can see the Green Connect landing page. The web address, in case you want to check out the landing page, there is a lot of information there, is www.greenconnect.com. And so feel free to visit that site for general information. Again, you won't be able to log in as a customer and register until later this year, but there's a lot of information on that page as well. Next slide. Now, when you are able to register your property, you'll notice up in the right-hand corner of that landing page that there is an option to click homeowner and then register your home. And then you'll see this page right here, which is register your property. Then you just go through and you enter your address and you verify your address. Once you register within the system, you'll have access to that education and then access to the installer list that I had mentioned. Next slide, please. The other thing that you'll see first, before you even get to the contractors and the other items, the educational items, you will see a high-level process for Green Connect participation. You'll probably notice it's pretty similar to what the process that Becky went through, but basically you register, you choose your installer. Like Becky said, you should always get multiple bids. You have your system installed and then verified, and then you enjoy the benefits of your system. We try to keep it very simple and keep it in line with the processes out there. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, once you register, you're going to see many options in here. If you click on the contractors tab, you'll see the different search and filtering capabilities. You can search by name, you can search by service, by experience, by distance from your home, if you want to use a contractor that is located close to you, by rating, by number of jobs. If you want a installer that has completed many jobs, you can look for that. And then on this slide, you'll also see the current list of quality contractor network installers. All of these installers have met all of the qualifications to be on the TVA Quality Contractor Network. They've received the additional training. They meet all of the insurance requirements. They've agreed to do business in the Valley ethically and professionally. And so this is really a way to ensure that you get a good installation. And I believe that's my last slide. So thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Lisa. I think now we're going to play a video of a couple of our customers who submitted solar projects last year and came online earlier this year, and they're going to talk about their experiences. It's about 7 minutes long, but it's really valuable. So if you're able, we're almost done. But they did a great job of explaining their processes and their motivation and all the work they did. So take a listen.
There was a lot of talk about solar panel installations last year, and social media is flooded with ads about it. So it was no surprise that MLGW saw a 10-fold spike in applications for home solar generation last year. MLGW wanted to talk to some customers and learn about their solar installations. We learned that no matter if you live in the city or the suburbs, the experience and lessons learned were all similar. We talked to Mike in Midtown.
So my name is Mike Larrabee. I bought this house in Cooper Young when I moved back from Europe in 2013. It's a Craftsman bungalow built in 1922.
And Linda in Bartlett.
My name is Linda Allen. We've lived in this home for 26 years. It's about 2,800 square feet.
We asked them why they decided to install solar panels on their homes.
It's the right thing to do. I'm a scientist, so I guess I'm more inclined to the data-driven side of things. But ideologically, it's the right thing to do as well.
We have been interested in energy efficient projects in the house since we moved in. Our goal was to save money every couple of years so we could do different projects. And solar energy has always been very interesting to me, and this year with the tax incentives and just saving enough money to do it, we decided this year was the year for the project. Biggest thing this year, we were home a lot. I was a little more conscious of how much energy we were using, and how to become more efficient with it. I saw that there were so many tax incentives this year, and it was at one of the higher percentages. That's what was the deciding factor.
One thing we learned was how they began making their journey making weatherization improvements to their home.
We've done some energy efficiency stuff. Insulation was also a big thing. We definitely, all the appliances and the light fixtures and the electrical system are all updated, and were updated prior to us putting the solar panels on the roof.
We've gotten all new windows. One of our projects, energy efficient double pane with argon gas. We've had our siding redone. We have all LED light bulbs. We've done some thermal curtains to keep in the energy. Several other little things to change, like putting a blanket on the water heater or weather stripping or some things like that.
How you can make your house more energy efficient and reduce your consumption, because it'll reduce the size of the system that's required. That's the biggest piece of advice I can think of.
They both received quotes and gave some helpful advice about this part of the process.
I'm going to say 2.5, but 2. I started with 1 and realized it was a lot more than what I was looking for, so I actually got 2 full quotes.
3, for sure. And actually, that's something that I put out there. There's definitely some snake oil salesmen in this emerging market, and I definitely walked one of them to my front door for being dishonest. I had done my research prior to and was just looking for somebody that could provide the quality service that I was looking for.
Yes, research. Mike said it, and so did Linda. Research and educate yourself first.
Do the research, make sure you know what your needs and your consumption are before you get into the conversation with somebody that's got more information than you. So understand what your need is, understand what fair market value is for the equipment that you're investing in.
1, I would seek your quotes. 2, read reviews of the company, check the Better Business Bureau. Call the company, ask them what their policies are, what information they have. You should be the one making contact, not as soon as you Google something, it shows up and they call you and start asking questions. You make the contact.
And make sure you do the research. Make sure that if you don't understand the legal implications of your contract, that you're asking for help from somebody that has credentials or experience or knowledge about those things specifically, so you don't get taken advantage of, because people will do that.
We also asked the question that everyone wants to know: how much does it cost?
It's around the neighborhood of $30,000, and to be clear, that includes all of the wiring, permitting, 12 panels on the roof, and all of the associated mechanical system that's associated to that, I guess, and that Tesla Powerwall that's sitting on the back of my house.
It sounds like a really big number at first. It's about $40,000.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. I bet you're curious as to how long it will take the solar panels to pay off.
6.5 years, I did the ROI.
The payback, if you look at it, basically what a good company is going to do for you is look at your electric bills, see how much they cost, and even if you do a credit and you've got to pay monthly, they'll get it to a point where your bill is what your average electric bill would be. So basically you're paying the same thing, but you're buying a system and you're getting the solar, using the solar energy and reducing the carbon footprint. So you could look at, in the average person, when I researched how you would pay it off, about 20 years.
With such a big expense, we asked if the purchase was meeting their expectations.
So it's a 4.04 kilowatt system, and it was sized correctly. I also did the math to make sure that their math and my math matched. It's another thing that you want to do once you understand what your peak and annual power consumption is. But yeah, it is meeting my expectations, but I kind of knew what I was getting into.
It's actually exceeding it. When I went into it, I had some expectations as to what it would gain me, what kind of solar energy I would get.
Mike and Linda offer some important advice. The first thing you want to do is weatherize your home. Next, you want to do your research. And last but not least, get multiple quotes. MLGW would like to thank Mike and Linda for welcoming us into their homes and sharing their experience. We hope you find it useful. For more information about solar resources, visit mlgw.com/greenpower.
Excellent. So thank you to our customers for giving us sort of an insight to their tour of how they made the solar decision. I thought they did great. We just asked them a couple questions and then they just shared, and it worked out really well. So I hope that was valuable to you. Nathan, if you'll go back to the main presentation, we have like 2 more slides. And if you've got questions, feel free to type them into the question and answer. We're gonna do those towards the end. So after you've done all your research and you've decided that, maybe solar on-site generation is really not going to be the solution for you, you can still support renewable energy through off-site generation program options. The one that's available for residential customers is called Green Switch. And for as low as $2 a month, you can help support renewable generation, including from sites. There's about 100 solar generation sites here in Shelby County that supply some of that renewable energy for Green Switch. No upfront investment. There's some details there, and as well as a website. And you can also, if you're a business or an organization and you're interested, there's other programs scaled for those larger needs. Next slide. So just some, final reminders, and I know we're just hammering home on what to do, but these are really important things to think about because you're making a really big decision. Start with those energy efficiency measures. Not only is it going to help you save electricity, it's also going to allow you to install a smaller array. Realize that solar generation on site is not for everyone. Okay? That's just the reality. It's a long-term investment because that residential scale solar generation is definitely not taking advantage of the economies of scale that utility scale generation does. So it may be better just to get your renewables through your power supply or do things like Green Switch. Realize that there are some great solar installers working in Tennessee, and there's also some not some great ones. So you want to do your research before you sign a contract. You've got control of that. Contact MLGW. There's my email address. If you're thinking about this, we've got just a standard package of information that I keep updated that we send out. So do take advantage. Do contact your utility. That's the big takeaway. And then watch for later this year when MLGW launches the Green Connect program. That will give you access to the Quality Contractor Network, to some of the educational materials that Lisa showed you in the portal. If you want more information today, mlgw.com/greenpower is the place to go. And I think we have one final slide, Nathan, that is the Empowering Neighborhood Series slide, and we can take Q&A.
All right, thank you for all of those who've hung in there with us through the entire series. We know we're running a little bit over. I do want to remind you that on August 26th, we will be continuing our Empowering Sustainable Neighborhood series, and that time we'll be plugging into electric vehicles. So any of those of you who are thinking about getting a Tesla or any other type of electric vehicle, or just want to know a little bit more about it, that's the time for you. So you can go back to our Eventbrite site, mlgwneighborhoods.eventbrite.com, to register for those. But if you're here, you'll be getting more information about that because you're obviously probably on our mailing list. With that said, gonna go hit the questions. I'm gonna answer one of the ones that's in the chat first. Corey wants to know, what is the payback on MLGW's energy generation for my home versus solar for my home?
What is the payback? That's a challenging question, Corey. I'm not really sure where you're going. So you're paying on average about 9 cents per kilowatt hour for everything you buy from MLGW. And you can find that electric rate at mlgw.com, click on residential, and then click on residential rate. It's listed as RS in the table that'll pop up there. So if you want some really fascinating reading, you can do that. When you generate solar power and you're using it on site, you're then offsetting. So the value of that kilowatt hour is 9 cents or whatever close to 9 cents it happens to be that particular month. Other than that, I'm not sure if your question had more nuance to it. I missed it.
Corey, if you didn't answer your question, just put us a little bit more detail in the Q&A. We're going to go over to the Q&A and a question from Nate. why does MLGW not offer net metering? Or will MLGW be offering net metering in the near future?
So under our contract with TVA, we're required to buy 100% of the electricity that we distribute to customers from TVA. Hence, we can't buy it from a customer, which is what net metering would be. As you know, we're in a power supply decision right now. If we decide to stay with TVA under that contract, no net metering. If we decide to stay with TVA under a different contract, it may give us some flexibility. Or if we decide to leave TVA and go with other power suppliers, there may be flexibility as well. So that could change in the future, no guarantee yet.
All right, thanks, Becky. We've got a lot of questions from Libby. Libby is really interested. She wants to know, what is the monthly connection charge? And also, are these charges able to be covered by the TVA credit if selling excess power?
So I think you're talking about the electric service availability fee. It's a duplication of the customer charge. It's in the electric rate. It's currently $12.76 per month. So you have the flat customer charge plus that added together. So if you were able to generate 100% of your power, you bought no kilowatt hours from MLGW in a month, you would still pay that combined, what is that, $25.52? And Libby, if you have more questions we don't get to, please email me later and I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, go ahead.
She also had a question about the technical review and wanted to know, why does the technical review take up to 3 weeks?
The group that currently does the technical review is our planning and systems engineering group. So they're just working it in with all the other work. We don't have enough solar applications to have a dedicated person to do it. I say it takes up to 3 weeks if they were really busy. Lately, the applications, they're generally cranked out within about 4 or 5 days. It also depends on whether or not your installer needs to make revisions. So if the one-line drawing they submitted doesn't match the interconnection option you selected, that's a problem. The installer has to update something. If the application doesn't have the right information, it's got to be revised. So once we get to it, it's pretty quick. We might not get to it right away because of backlogs. If it takes a long time, it's usually because there's a deficiency in your application and we're working with the installer to get that corrected.
All right, one last question from Libby. If the installer is paying that, why can you not send it directly to them? And why can it not be emailed?
It sounds like you're talking about the construction quote. It goes to the customer because that's the way our system is set up in customer engineering. Contractors can reach out to the assigned customer engineering rep and have it emailed to them as well. So there are different ways, but the default is it gets mailed to the customer because you're the customer making that request for service.
All right, and Libby, I see you've got a lot of questions. I know Becky's probably more than happy to talk to you more. Her email address is bwilliamson@mlgw.org if somebody can enter that into the chat for us. We're going to move on to Sarah. Sarah has a question about how much insurance will MLGW require for connection? Any idea of how much it runs per year?
So that's listed in section 10 of the interconnection agreement. It's out, there's a draft or a sample of it out there on the website. It varies based on incident and number of people and all that, but I want to say the highest one is not less than $700,000 for all people in one occurrence. So typically homeowners insurance, you know, your liability coverage is about $300,000. A $1 million umbrella policy will vary in price. Talk to your insurance agent. It's probably as low as maybe like $100, and it's probably based on your house and the number of vehicle drivers and all this other kind of stuff. Mine costs me about $500 a year. Will also vary depending on your age. So talk to your insurance guy. They're the one that, or gal, they're the person that can help you.
All right, Becky, I know this is a question you will like to answer. Does MLGW offer time of use rates? If not, does MLGW plan to do so in the future?
So yes, sort of, and yes, definitely. So in 2010 through 2012, we had a smart meter demonstration project, had about 1,000 residential customers. About 13% of them signed up for a pilot time of use rate. They're still on that rate. We now need to program the rate so that it can be billed automatically through the billing system. Right now, those customers have to be manually billed, and it's pretty complicated and labor intensive for an individual to do. So we're not openly offering it. Once it gets programmed so that we can automate the billing, it will be there. You can find information about it at on the website, MLGW, click residential rates, and then look in the table for TOU. The time of use rate is designed to encourage customers to use less electricity during on-peak hours and shift some of their things off-peak. That's the point behind it.
All right, and I think we've got one last question from Libby. She's back. Are the charges, is this one the same one again? Are the charges able to be covered by TVA credit we receive if producing excess power? I know I already asked this, but I didn't actually get the answer. So I think
The charge. Okay, so if you're meaning are the that $25.52 electricity cost, even if you generated 100% of your power, that is going to be on your utility bill. And if you're selling your excess electricity to TVA, they're going to pay you via direct deposit. So it just would depend on whether or not you had enough excess electricity to offset the cost, but they're two different financial transactions. And really in a perfect world, when you're trying to size this, you want to minimize the amount of excess electricity you're going to have, because it's only worth 2.5 cents, whereas the electricity you can consume on site is worth about 9. So as you're putting a system in, you really want to do it where you're minimizing the number of months and the number of days that you're going to have that excess electricity. Again, it goes back to having a good quality installer. I think on one of the slides that Chris had, it was an MLGW section, so he didn't talk about it directly, but you can go to my account at mlgw.com, click on my meter data, and you can actually see your 30-minute interval consumption data for your electric meter. You can download that data, share it with a solar installer to use in developing your proposal. Some of the better installers do that automatically. They ask for that on a regular basis to help understand how your home uses electricity, what hours of the day, because it may be different than your neighbor's home or the last project they installed. So the more information, the more research you do, the better decision, the better system you'll end up with if you decide that solar is right for your home.
all right, well, I think that's all of the questions. Cynthia, do you see anything that I may have missed?
No, I don't see anything.
All right, we did just have a comment from Chad. He said, this is pretty much everything SunPro told my mom. So it's good we're all speaking the same language. I think we've got all of the Q&A and covered all of the chat. And we thank you for the extra 17 minutes of your time that you gave us. Just in closing, again, just want to remind you to join us for the third in this series. You can also go back to our website and catch if you missed our first series on power outages rooted in the trees, where we talked about everything regarding trees, as how to care for trees, MLGW's tree trimming policies, and how to select trees to help you save energy. You can catch that session. You can also see on our website this session if you want to get a refresher, and then we'll be back on August 26th with plugging into electric vehicles. I want to thank all of our panelists for all of the great information that you gave. Thank Gail Jones-Carson for kicking us off, and for Cynthia Haley for managing the Q&A and all of her work that she did in pulling this together. Seems like there's something else. She just put all of that information in the chat for us. So with that said, Gail, if you don't have any, you have any parting words? If not, we're going to log off.
I just want to again thank everyone for showing up, and I hope they learned a lot, and this has been very useful for them, and we will see them during our next show.
All right, Darren, we're done.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you all.
And Nathan. Thank you very much. Cynthia, all of you all. It was a great show, Becky.